There are a couple players that the Pittsburgh Steelers have been interested or showing interest in on the offensive side, and tight end Jonnu Smith and wide receiver Gabe Davis. Today we're going to talk about, should the Steelers do it? Should they not? Buy or sell? We'll be the judge. We'll put on our GM hat, so to speak. Please hit the like button, subscribe, ring that notification bell. You know what to do. Welcome to the huddle. So reports started brewing a little bit earlier this week that Jonnu Smith, tight end for the Miami Dolphins, currently was on the trade block, and the Steelers were interested in his position, or in his in him as a player, for being in his services. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Sorry about that, guys. They're interested in his services as a tight end. Kind of caught me off guard a little bit. The Steelers have Pat Freiermuth. They have Darnell Washington, who I think took some strides last year in the passing game. I still felt that they could use him a little bit more. All indications are he's coming to camp a little bit lighter. He's trying to lose a little bit of weight, trying to be a little bit more in the passing game. In the combine, he wowed a lot of teams with his athletic ability, given his size and his blocking ability. And so, I'm excited to see more Darnell Washington out there this upcoming season, and I'm hoping he plays a much larger role. The Steelers also acquired a guy in Darnold Farham, tight end, who is more of an athletic type. That's going to be the guy that's going to be more of a receiver type to kind of, I guess, match up with what Pat Freiermuth does. Pat Freiermuth being the all around good tight end. I think his blocking could be a little bit better at times. I think he's gotten better with his blocking over the years, and I think that's something that he continues to get better at. But his bread and butter was always his hands and his ability to get open and to snag those passes, especially in the red zone. Although the Steelers, for some reason, failed to use him, even though that is his forte, so to speak. Well, anywho, so the Steelers were interested in him. Those talks kind of died down. Then Farham comes down with a Achilles tendon rupture, and now they're starting to speak up again. Connor Hayward mentioned to the media that he wasn't sure about, the acquisition of Smith, due to the fact that they have Pat already, and Pat is a guy that's going to get the ball. Now, I think that if Smith ends up becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler, does he take away from the passes or from the receptions that Pat should be getting? Now, in the past, Pat Freiermuth hasn't gotten a lot of targets, so this would be somewhat of a concern, in my opinion. However, in the past, he really hasn't had the quarterback and or the confidence of the coaches in the quarterback for the quarterback to throw over the middle to basically, or maybe perhaps, utilize him more, or even have him be the main focal point outside of a couple of games against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now things are different. I feel that the Steelers this year is probably going to be the first time in a long time, or ever, under Arthur Smith, that we're probably going to see more of the Arthur Smith offense. I spoke yesterday, I apologize. I spoke yesterday about the fitment and how Caleb Johnson and his ability to run outside zone runs or wide zone gap runs, and how Arthur Smith was pretty much handcuffed because of Najee Harris and some of the players that they had last year, and how he was excited for the acquisition during the third round of Caleb Johnson so that they can run more of his offense. I think last year he may have had a couple of quarterbacks who are also incapable of running his offense to the tight end, or which feature the tight end and over the middle of the field throws. Now, enter in Mason Rudolph and or possibly Aaron Rodgers, two guys I don't think that are afraid to throw over the middle of the field. Maybe Mason has been a little bit trigger scared. I wouldn't say trigger happy, because it's the opposite of that. I think he's been a little bit overly conservative in his past with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Outside of the 3 games at the end of 2023, I felt that he was like, hey, who knows if he's going to be a quarterback the next year. He was buried on the depth chart for multiple years, not really given an opportunity. He'd already seeked, what he was going to get out there in free agency. It wasn't very much. And so, he said in his press conference, had a concern if he was ever going to be, an NFL quarterback again. So the pressure of him having to perform at an all-time elite level, was probably not there. What does he have to lose when he goes out there? So he made the throws probably with more confidence and reckless regard. And you know, I thought he did good. I think a lot of people thought he did good down the stretch. I think he overcame his happy feet and those type of things. But his ability to throw over the middle of the field and the deep pass, along with a new running game, I do think we're going to finally see more of Arthur Smith's offense, uh, which he features more than one tight end. He's done that for multiple years in Arthur Smith's offense. So either Darnell Washington's going to have to step it up in the passing game, especially now that Farham is out. And who knows if the trade ends up going through. The Steelers have like 50 draft picks in, in this upcoming draft. And so they definitely can move on from a couple if need be. And it is a position that, like I mentioned, with Pat Freiermuth, another reason to purchase or buy here is Pat Freiermuth has had some concussions over his career. He has not always been available, whether it be that or soft tissue issues or injuries. And so to have some backup or another capable passing receiving option out of the backfield or out of the tight end position, I think you would probably want to protect yourself and make sure you have more than one, which is why I think they went out there and got a guy like Darnell Farham. Fortunately, like I mentioned, the Achilles tendon rupture puts a big kink in that chain. Now, where do the Steelers go? I think maybe they do make this trade. If they do, what do they trade to the Miami Dolphins for? It's good choice, good discussion there. Perhaps maybe a fourth or fifth round. Tight ends don't typically go very high in the draft. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you'd have to be a special tight end. John Smith, who's 30 years old, which is considered old in the NFL. I know it's not considered old in real life, but in the NFL, it's considered old. And he's had one Pro Bowl year, I believe, which was last year, I think. And so, I would probably reckon somewhere around the fourth to fifth, maybe sixth round, somewhere around there. What about a player? I'm not sure what the Miami Dolphins needs are or what they would be inquiring from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, what about Gabe Davis, wide receiver? We talked a little bit about him yesterday. He torched up the Steelers a couple of years back with the when he was a member of the Buffalo Bills. The yards and the amount of his ability and what I think he could be is a very strong wide receiver too. It wouldn't do anything to the comp formula deal because that's already surpassed. So the Steelers, as long as the players, play the amount that they're expected to play and there aren't injuries, they're expected to get 4 comp picks next year, I believe. And so, with Gabe Davis, I mean, this is a guy that's going to keep teams honest. He's a speedier wide receiver, kind of similar to the other guys, but he's a little bit thicker than what the Steelers have. Maybe. I don't know. It depends on what he's asking for. He's coming off of a knee injury that, from what I have heard through my connections with the Steel Curtain Network and their connections with other beat writers, such as those from the Jacksonville Jaguars, it doesn't sound like he's 100% healthy, which is why they gave him the boot after a failed physical designation. So I don't know, man. I'm hearing a lot of good things about Roman Wilson, to be 110% honest with you guys. I want to see what that comes out to be. I want to see what he's able to do out there. Looking at his highlights at Michigan, because that's pretty much all you can do. He didn't participate much in preseason nor in regular season. When he was out there, it was more of a decoy and or participating as blocking, in the few handful of plays that he did play. So you got to look at what he was doing at Michigan. And, when he was a member of the Wolverines, they didn't really pass the ball that much, and he was still able to go out there and do what he was able to do. So I think that although he was injured, I think he did end up getting healthy enough to come back last year. I just think that he wasn't prepared or ready enough to get on a moving train, given that he had missed a huge component of the offseason last year. And he was a rookie, missed a huge portion of the regular season. I don't think that the reason they kept him out last year towards the stretch had anything to do with health anymore, as much as it was preparedness, readiness for a NFL football game and to go up against the competition. Well, he's gotten that time to progress and build up, plus the offseason up to this point. And I'm expecting some big things out of Roman Wilson. Can he be number 2? I don't know, man. That's a big question. I'm not even sure Gabe Davis can be number 2, to be honest with you. He's been a number 2 before. He's been paid as a number 2. So, you might want to, with the Steelers, I know they claim to not, live in their fears, but they do seek comfortability quite a bit. I wouldn't be surprised if they go with the comfort of a number 2 versus the unproven Roman Wilson, regardless of what he's showing in practice and or in OTAs. And thus far, given the fact that the weight of, what players do in stadium matters more to Mike Tomlin at this point. And, well, Gabe Davis, like I mentioned before, torched the Pittsburgh Steelers when he was a member of the Buffalo Bills. So, and that was in a regular season game. And, he's seen that. So maybe perhaps he might be swayed by something like that. If they sign him, I'd be excited. If they don't, it's no sweat off my back. I really wouldn't care. And that goes for both of these guys. Neither one of these guys are needle movers for me, to be 110% honest with you. Maybe perhaps Smith more so, just because I know how Arthur Smith likes to utilize multiple players and on the offense. He likes to use all of his running backs, all of his tight ends, all of his wide receivers. He likes a healthy rotation there to keep people fresh. And so I do think that if Farnham ends up becoming a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, he's going to get his targets. He's going to get his opportunities. And like I said, I think that this year, whether it's Mason Rudolph or it's Aaron Rodgers, I think the tight end is going to be featured much, much more. Well, that's all I got for you guys today. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit more about the Pittsburgh Steelers and any news that may have broken. And then don't forget on Saturday, guys, on the audio side only for Still Current Network at stillcurrentnetwork.com, I do my State of the Steelers podcast there. I usually show it here as well. So make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Ring that notification button. See you guys next time.